Good afternoon, I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our video discussion today, May 16th, 2024. We have multiple areas in the Eastern Pacific that we are watching today now, another area of interest added to the list, so let's get right on with it. First off, though, just really quickly looking at the Atlantic Bulletin, not much happening in terms of development expected over the next 7 days, and it looks like it'll remain that way for a good bit. But in the Eastern Pacific, on the other hand, the National Hurricane Center now has two areas it's watching. First off, the area we talked about yesterday, it is a 40% chance, has a medium chance just south of Mexico. Looks like it could develop near the coast of Mexico and then move west-northwest away out to sea. And then they also mentioned another area of interest, kind of all part of this big monsoon trough situation that is developing in the Eastern Pacific right now. And that's what's going to help this system to the east potentially develop. And some of the models have this, especially the GFS, becoming a formidable hurricane. But this is definitely another interesting area that the NHC mentioned today. It's disorganized showers and no extreme or no great amount of development is expected of this system, so it only has a 20% chance. So let's take a look at it on satellite. How does it look on satellite? You can see both areas in the Pacific very clearly. This is the area, the 40% chance mentioned. None of these areas are infested yet, by the way. We don't have any area of investigations out there yet, but when we do, we will get them probably tagged as at least one of these taking the invest area 90E. Of course, E meaning Pacific, and it's just to designate an area of interest to kind of keep on top of it and be able to run models specifically for that one area, although we do not have that just yet. But interestingly enough, this is that 20% chance that the NHC mentioned, and it is actually almost looking like it is trying to organize more. And I found an interesting tweet by Dylan that actually mentions that area, that eastern lobe, if you will, is actually in the process of acquiring a better, well-defined low-level center, and he actually mentioned it not long ago. But you could see that he shows the ASCAP pass kind of showing what the lower level circulation is, and you could kind of see some turning shown on the pass, meaning that there is some sort of low level center that is trying to get going. So maybe this area might kind of throw us off by surprise a little bit, and we might get something to come out of it. It is definitely very possible, although we'll have to see. And we could look at it on the vorticity as well. This area right here to the west, lots of stronger vorticity signatures being registered. So maybe indeed that this will try to develop more at least than what the NHC has at only a 20% chance. But this is the area to the west, the area to the east is the area that the models are forming the most, which is why the NHC is giving it the higher chance. They kind of think it's all part of this big monsoon trough situation where I guess maybe multiple areas are trying to form dominant vortice areas. But it seems like, according to the models, that the area to the east, closer to Mexico, will be the one that becomes more dominant. And we could take a look at the GFS right now to show that you can kind of see too multiple areas of vorticity that are kind of stretched out within this one area. But as we move it out into time, you can see the GFS really begins to consolidate vorticity to the east, and eventually by hour 72. Looks like we do have a developing tropical system on our hands. You can see closed isobars. Definitely a look that is closing off and trying to centralize over one area, and that is that area closer to Mexico. And in fact, the GFS, by the time we get to hour 96, looks like a tropical storm almost. Definitely looks formidable, and it definitely looks like a developing system. This is definitely the kind of signal you would look at when you're trying to find if the model is trying to develop or show any hints of development of the system or not. And this definitely looks like a developing tropical system for sure. And as we carry it out into time, as we head in towards hour 120, and even let's take it out into the next week or so, so up to hour 168, so the next 7 days, the GFS ends up forming this into a formidable hurricane just off the coast of Mexico. So no direct impact to the coast, but you'll still get, of course, high seas, rip current risks along the coast, especially as this does strengthen. But the GFS, very aggressive on this. And if we look at it actually in terms of its surface pressure, yeah, very aggressive on this system. GFS has this becoming 964 millibars. And that is knocking on the door, at least when it comes to the assumption made by central pressure. That does bring it pretty close to potentially major hurricane status, or at least one could assume that that's what the GFS is showing. And so they definitely turn that area into a more dominant system. So GFS kind of indicating that the Eastern Pacific will kind of start off fast. I did mention yesterday the Eastern Pacific does have a tendency sometimes to start off faster a little bit than the Atlantic, but I'm sure the Atlantic will probably take back its lead in the coming weeks as we head closer and closer into and also through the hurricane season as well. Atlantic will probably overtake everybody this year, especially given how much activity is expected. And of course, given that there is just a La Nina in place in general in the Pacific, so obviously the Atlantic is expected to take over. But still, that does not mean that we won't get intense development in the Eastern Pacific. And in fact, and I briefly do want to talk about this, climatology in the Pacific, we tend to see storms develop around this region in the Pacific, just south of Mexico. Most of them tend to be weak, but we do tend to have sometimes early season strong storms, and they also take a path mostly west-northwest out to sea. It's really around August or September when we start seeing storms begin to recurve and impact Mexico. But we're not there yet, and it doesn't look like this storm will be any significant threat to Mexico as well. So there's no reason to really be concerned about either of these systems developing. But of course, it is part of the Eastern Pacific and the kind of tracking season in the Atlantic and the Pacific as a whole getting started. And obviously, in the coming weeks, we'll get more of this action, especially in the Atlantic as well, given that we are expecting a busy hurricane season there. That does wrap it up for this video, though. Really nothing much else to talk about. It's only May 16th. We have a lot more ahead of us, and I'm pretty sure very soon we will definitely be having a lot more to talk about. But for now, just areas we're watching in the Eastern Pacific that'll develop over the next week or so and stay off away from Mexico. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for another update tomorrow. I'm going to do these updates once again on a more daily basis. So expect another update tomorrow in the afternoon, maybe around the same time. And we'll see what the Eastern Pacific has in store for us then. Or even if something pops up in the Atlantic too, can't always be too sure of that. Anyways, thanks for watching. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to all. And we'll talk again tomorrow.